Let's dive right into this explainer and absolutely crush one of the trickiest parts of the IELTS listening test. If you've been studying for the IELTS, you already know that parts 2 and 3 of the listening section can throw some serious curveballs your way. But today, we're going to completely demystify the matching information question type so you can walk into that exam room feeling 100% confident. You know that awful feeling when the audio starts playing and suddenly literally none of the options match what you're hearing? You're frantically scanning the list, the speaker is already moving on to the next topic, and panic just kind of sets in. Well, that is exactly the trap of the matching information question. The test makers deliberately create this massive disconnect between what your eyes are seeing on the page and what your ears are actually hearing through the headphones. So here's our roadmap for today. We've got 5 main areas. First, the matching information challenge. Second, 3 golden strategies. Third, the paraphrasing trap. Fourth, some real test practice. And finally, paper versus computer tests. Let's get right to it. Starting off with Section 1, the matching information challenge. Let's unpack exactly how test makers design this cute little trap for you. This brilliantly illustrates the core problem. You always have more options than questions, and you can only use each option once. Imagine you're staring at your test. At the bottom, you have 6 specific questions, say job titles like fresh food commercial manager or agronomist. But up at the top, staring back at you, is a box with 8 completely different, highly descriptive options. Your brain has to juggle all these surplus choices while the audio relentlessly pushes forward. It's basically a deliberate stress test for your cognitive load management. Moving right along to Section 2, 3 golden strategies. We aren't just going to try harder. We're going to completely flip the test in your favor. Okay, so the golden rule to remember here is that the questions at the bottom are spoken in exact order without any paraphrasing. But you absolutely must memorize those options before the audio starts because they are going to be completely transformed. Step 1 is your anchor. Pre-read those options and burn their core meanings into your memory. Step 2, listen for the exact question keywords in order. The speaker actually gives you a lifeline by saying the exact words of the question prompts, like commercial manager, so you know exactly where you are. But step 3 is where you earn your score, matching those chronological audio cues with the heavily paraphrased option list. Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, the paraphrasing trap. This is where things get really interesting. The crucial point here is that absolutely 0 keywords from the options will be repeated in the audio. If you're sitting there waiting to hear exact words, you'll miss everything. The test is actively evaluating your ability to catch synonyms. For example, if you hear someone's doing 12-month maternity cover, your brain needs to instantly translate that to not a permanent job. Or if they say people quickly make their way up the career ladder, you have to match that meaning to chance for rapid promotion. And I absolutely love this third one. The audio casually mentions the staff work hard, but they play hard as well. The correct option, intensive work but also fun. It's a total game of mental gymnastics where meaning is everything. Let's look at how this builds even further. Renting a sweet little cottage? That translates perfectly to accommodation available. Or if they mention the company will consider someone who just completed an appropriate training course, that's their sneaky way of saying the person hasn't actually worked in the field yet. Boom, experience not essential. And if your job involves visiting centers in the region, the test maker's secret code for that is local travel involved. See what's happening? You aren't hunting for words, you're translating scenarios into broad concepts. All right, Section 4, real test practice. Time to put on our thinking caps and apply all of this in real time. Imagine you're sitting in the exam hall right now taking a practice test about a tourist information office. After about 30 seconds of super distracting chit-chat where they're just making small talk about 4-star hotels and having a car, you finally hear this quote about the Royal Oak. The key phrase they drop is out in the country about 10 kilometers away. So, which option perfectly matches the phrase out in the country? I'll give you just a couple of seconds to guess the correctly paraphrased option based purely on meaning, not exact words. Think about it. What broader category does a peaceful, remote location fall into? Sweet victory. If you guessed a hotel in a rural area, you successfully dodged the first trap. The audio never actually said rural, but out in the country paints the exact same picture. You listened for the meaning and totally ignored the lack of matching keywords. Next up, they try to trick you by mentioning the Carlton House is a very old building. But right after that distraction, they drop this crucial quote. They completely refurbished it. They took their first guests just a few months ago.
Okay, so which option matches completely refurbished and took their first guests a few months ago? Remember, you have to focus entirely on the meaning of the action happening in the audio right now. They dangled the phrase very old building to tempt you into choosing a historical option. But what does the action of taking first guests just a few months ago actually mean?
Exactly, because taking first guests a few months ago simply means it only opened recently. That old building comment was a total distraction. It's a classic misdirection. The building itself is old, sure, but the business operation is brand new. By focusing on the core action of the sentence, you bypass that trap entirely.
Moving right along to the Imperial Hotel, we hear this lovely list of amenities. The speaker says it has an internet connection, meeting rooms, and is frequently used for conferences and corporate events.
So, what do meeting rooms and corporate events translate to in our options list? Scan your mental list for a second. How would you summarize conferences, corporate events, and meeting rooms into one neat professional package?
Bang on, corporate events and meeting rooms are perfectly packaged as office facilities for business functions. You didn't hear the word business or facilities in the audio at all, but the descriptive scenario was absolutely unmistakable.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, paper versus computer tests, because knowing how to mark your answer is just as crucial as knowing what the answer is. If you're taking the paper-based test, always write the letter. Writing the full word gets you 0 points, which is a nightmare, and furiously cross out used options to narrow your choices down. But if you're taking it on a computer, you get the satisfying magic of dragging and dropping. When you drag an option over, it just vanishes from your list, keeping your cognitive load super low and your screen perfectly clean. So with all these golden strategies in your pocket, you are no longer at the mercy of the audio. You're basically a detective hunting for underlying concepts. As you head into your exam, I want you to ask yourself, how many of these hidden paraphrasing traps will you confidently spot and defeat? The next time you're doing a practice listening test, actively hunt for that hidden meaning rather than getting tricked by missing keywords. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and go crush that test.